real quick. Watch this, guys. Now, this is when Canada tripped herself, and Caitlin Clark was literally bagging back, giving her room to go because she was already at what? 4 fouls or something like that. 4 fouls. Now what?
Look closely at that sequence again. Caitlin Clark isn't merely requesting a review. She's urgently signaling toward the monitor, breaking down exactly what unfolded, almost pleading for her coach to challenge the call. And Stephanie White? She barely even acknowledges her. That brief 30-second exchange reveals far more than most people realize about what's unfolding in Indiana right now, because this wasn't some isolated incident. It's a recurring pattern that's been quietly building throughout the entire season.
Stephanie White wasted a challenge on Sophie Cunningham. To me, her not using any challenges for Caitlin Clark completely is the reason why they lost this game. Caitlin Clark did not play majority of the fourth quarter. She came in, there's 3 minutes and 28 seconds left. She got in foul trouble early. I think she had 3 fouls going into the third quarter. So that there was a telltale sign that, maybe I need to keep a challenge because they clearly have.
The Fever had their 4-game surge come to a sudden halt against Atlanta. That's what the final score says. But the real story is buried far from the stat sheet. Caitlin Clark spent most of the fourth quarter stuck on the sideline. She didn't return until just 3 minutes and 28 seconds remained. The question is why? It started with her third foul before the third quarter even settled in. Then came a highly disputed fourth foul after halftime. Just like that, Indiana's most dangerous weapon was forced to watch as momentum slowly slipped through their fingers. And this is where the frustration boils over for Fever fans. Stephanie White still had a challenge available. She had the opportunity to take a closer look at those controversial whistles. She had a chance to protect the player who drives everything Indiana does. But when the moment arrived, the challenge wasn't spent on Caitlin Clark. It wasn't used to erase the foul that changed the game. Instead, the review went to Sophie Cunningham, not Clark. Sophie Cunningham, a decision that immediately raised questions and left fans wondering what was really going on behind the scenes.
Well, that kind of answers the question earlier about that challenge that you asked, because
I just wasn't a fan of it at that time for a play that to us at the time. I mean, think about how long that review went.
Yeah,
it wasn't cut and dry, and now you've got one of your best players sitting on the bench with 5 personals.
Even the announcers had to call out.
Even the broadcast crew sounded stunned. In the middle of the game, they were openly questioning the coach's decisions, specifically the refusal to challenge calls that were hurting the team's biggest star. Think about that for a second. How often do announcers criticize a head coach in real time while the action is still unfolding? Almost never. It takes something so glaring, so difficult to overlook, that silence is no longer an option. Then came the sequence that changed everything. Just 52 seconds remained before halftime. Caitlin was already carrying 3 fouls when Alicia Gray suddenly lost her footing and went down. Replays appeared to show no contact. Caitlin was already heading the other direction, focused on getting back defensively, nowhere close to the play. Yet the whistle sounded. Foul number 4. That was the critical moment, the turning point, the exact situation where a challenge could have altered the course of the game. It seemed like the obvious decision sitting right in front of everyone. But there was one problem. Stephanie White no longer had that option available. The challenge had already been spent earlier on a play that carried far less weight, a review so straightforward and uneventful that the officials resolved it almost immediately. And when the truly game-changing call arrived, there was nothing left to use.
Starting during her last years in Iowa, Caitlin Clark seemed destined to follow a similar journey to icon status. Her start to her WNBA career has already been record-setting. The only thing she was lacking, though, was that long-awaited signature shoe. Well, guess what? It dropped today. Check out Nike's Caitlin 1. And you see those stacked swooshes over there? You see how they're look like C's? Well, Nike says they were designed to mimic her initials, which you see up on the tongue. And then even the nodes on the outside also look like C's. Now, Clark becomes the 5th active WNBA player with her.
The scrutiny has now reached a completely different level. Sports Illustrated recently highlighted the situation, and the message was impossible to miss. Robin Lundberg pointed directly at the growing issue, arguing that managing a player like Caitlin Clark comes with unique responsibilities and that Stephanie White continues letting crucial opportunities slip away. This wasn't a comment buried on social media or coming from an obscure voice. It came from one of the most recognized names in sports media, openly questioning questioning a WNBA coach's handling of her franchise centerpiece. What makes it even more striking is that the criticism wasn't focused on a single moment. The report detailed several occasions throughout the season where White had clear chances to challenge questionable foul calls involving Clark and declined to do so. Not one isolated decision, not two unfortunate mistakes. The examples stretched across multiple games, each adding another layer to the conversation. With every missed review, the questions grew louder. Was it simply strategy, or was something deeper unfolding? That's why this debate refuses to disappear. The evidence keeps stacking up, game after game, creating a trail that's becoming harder to dismiss. At this point, critics aren't talking about coincidence anymore. They're pointing to a recurring trend that has surfaced repeatedly throughout the season, one that continues drawing attention every time another controversial whistle goes unchallenged.
Not be able to buy them until October. Michael Jordan.
So that was ESPN letting us know that Caitlin Clark is one of them ones. Now, this is a controversial person right here. A lot of people don't like him. Even me, I don't really care for him, but he do make good articles for Sports Illustrated. That is Robin Lundberg. So Robin Lundberg is getting off the bandwagon, and he wrote an article today. He says, coaching Caitlin Clark come with challenges. Stephanie White can't hold to them. Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White could stand to use some of her challenges on the calls made against who? Caitlin Clark. He goes on to say, coaching the...
Now consider the bigger picture from a tactical standpoint. Around the league, everyone has seen the same trend unfold. Caitlin Clark often finds herself whistled for questionable contact, while on the other end she absorbs heavy pressure without always getting the same benefit of the call. Fair or unfair, it has become one of the most talked about storylines surrounding her season. Because of that, any coaching staff preparing for a game should already anticipate the possibility of a critical foul call against their star guard. That's exactly why challenges exist. You keep one available for the moment that could dramatically alter the outcome. You hold on to it when your most important player is at risk of being pushed into foul trouble. You don't spend it early on a routine sequence involving a supporting piece with far less impact on the game's direction. The priority is obvious. You safeguard the player the entire franchise is built around. That's the fundamental logic most people expect. Yet the frustration continues because the pattern appears to move in the opposite direction. Time after time, the challenge is gone before the most consequential moments arrive. Then when a controversial whistle lands on Clark and the stakes are highest, there's no safety net left. That's why the criticism keeps growing. Fans aren't just questioning one decision anymore. They're questioning a repeated approach that seems to ignore the very situations those challenges were designed to address.
This play pulled up for y'all. Was this
Still goes against Caitlin Clark. What are these refs even watching right now?
Look, yep.
Canada slips and hits the floor, but the whistle.
So that was this play right here. Now, Caitlin Clark is storming, telling Stephanie, she's yelling. She's definitely yelling at Stephanie and them to challenge the play. To me, based on the evidence, based on everything that has happened this season, by them not challenging Caitlin plays,
This is where the story takes an even more surprising turn. Look back across the entire season and ask yourself one simple question. Can you find a single moment where Stephanie White used a coach's challenge to erase a foul assessed to Caitlin Clark? Just one example. Search through the games, review the clips, go through the highlights. The answer many critics keep pointing to is the same. They can't find one. Not a single challenge used specifically to pull Clark out of foul trouble. And that's what keeps fueling the conversation. Because on the other side, the video evidence keeps piling up. Time after time, Clark can be seen heading toward the bench after a controversial whistle. She's gesturing toward the screen, pointing out details, breaking down the play, trying to make her case. The urgency is written all over her face. She clearly believes the call deserves another look, yet the response appears unchanged. The challenge never comes. Not in one isolated game. Not during one frustrating night. According to critic, the same sequence keeps repeating itself. Clark argues her side, the opportunity is there, and the review is never used. That's why so many people remain fixated on this issue. It's no longer about a single missed challenge. It's about a pattern that keeps resurfacing, creating more questions every time it happens again.
Challenges when it comes to Clark, specifically not using her coach's challenges on fouls called against the star point guard. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Stephanie White has ever used a challenge on one of Caitlin Clark's challenges this entire season. I don't think she used one specifically for a Caitlin foul. Goes on to say, this stood out in the team's loss against Atlanta Dream. One that saw Caitlin Clark have to sit for a stretch in the fourth quarter due to foul trouble. There was a clear instance toward the end of the first half where White should have challenged a foul against Caitlin Clark with 52 seconds left. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
Now the situation becomes even more revealing. Right after that Alicia Gray sequence, Caitlin instantly recognized something wasn't right. From her perspective, Gray had simply lost her footing, and the whistle that followed made no sense. Without hesitation, she headed directly towards Stephanie White looking for a review. Watch the exchange closely. The most telling part isn't what gets said, it's what doesn't. White's reaction appears immediate. There is no pause, no visible debate, no sense that she's weighing the possibility. The decision seems made before the discussion can even develop. The moment arrives and disappears almost instantly. But there was another layer to the story that Caitlin may not have realized at the time. The option she was asking for no longer existed. Earlier in the game, the coach's challenge had already been used on the Sophie Cunningham play, a review many viewed as straightforward long before officials completed their evaluation. The process dragged on, but the outcome never seemed particularly difficult to predict. And that decision suddenly carried enormous consequences, because when the controversial foul on Clark arrived, there was no challenge left in reserve, no opportunity to take another look, no chance to reverse the call. As Caitlin searched for help in a critical moment, the resource that could have changed everything had already disappeared. The challenge was gone, and with it went any possibility of correcting that whistle.
Fighting back towards Caitlin by not challenging her plays, putting her in bad situations, taking her on the ball, off the ball, using Kelsey Mitchell, running it with Kelsey Mitchell. And that could be a strong reason as to why they're not challenging the plays, man. There's no other reason. Caitlin Clark wants out of Indy, and the Indy front office knows it. I am 100% convinced. You can't sit up here and tell me that if your star player on any level of sports, and you got a chance to challenge a play, and you don't challenge that play against the best player on your team, you don't like the best player on your team, and you want them in foul trouble. You don't want them in the game. That's the only answer. Stephanie White, the front office, don't want Caitlin in the game because Caitlin don't want to be in Indiana. That's the only explanation I could think of. Get down in the comment section right now. Let me know y'all thoughts about this. Keep them bells on. And until next time, man.
So now we arrive at the question nobody seems comfortable asking. Why does this continue happening? Why does the coach repeatedly avoid using critical resources to help the team's biggest star? Why are challenges spent on minor moments, only for there to be nothing available when controversial fouls place the franchise's centerpiece in jeopardy? And why does the same storyline keep resurfacing night after night? When people examine the situation, they generally land on two possible explanations. The first is simple. Maybe Stephanie White struggles with in-game decision-making. Maybe challenge strategy, substitution patterns, and late-game management have been issues all season. Critics point to confusing rotations and several puzzling choices that appeared to cost Indiana opportunities in games they could have won. There is certainly evidence that supports that interpretation. Perhaps the answer is nothing more complicated than coaching mistake. Yet even that theory leaves unanswered questions, because regardless of record or experience, most coaches instinctively protect their top player when foul trouble threatens to change a game. That's not some advanced tactical concept. It's basic basketball logic, which leads many observers toward a second possibility. What if there are factors behind closed doors that fans aren't aware of? What if tensions exist that have never been publicly discussed? What if conversations about the future have created friction inside the organization? Suddenly, decisions that appear irrational on the surface begin looking different through that lens. To be clear, there is no confirmed evidence supporting those possibilities. No verified reports, no public statements, and no proof that Clark has expressed any desire to leave or that the organization feels differently about her future. But speculation continues because the visible pattern keeps raising questions. Some fans point to offensive adjustments, stretches where the ball appears last